Good morning, everyone. My name is Snehal. I belong to New Delhi, that is in India. Now, as far as my education qualifications are concerned, I am bachelor's in commerce and doing my research in English. You can even say that is my experimenting in English. However, if I talk about my profession, as far as my profession is concerned, I am a managing director, come a teacher, a faculty in the Excellence Campus. That is my company wherein I take the English subject as my primary subject. And English, as we all know that English is so necessary these days. It is a mode of communication and a medium of communication to the base, to the primary level. We start communicating something which is very important for others to understand and like others to actually take a grip of communication and reverting that back. There are four major components in English accepted as all the English language examination that are whether that are international or national domestically accepted. Now let us talk about English. The four major or the four components that are useful these days is reading, writing, listening, and speaking. Now, as far as reading is concerned, reading includes your comprehension, your passage writing, your unseen passages, answering the questions to the passages that are given. Mostly useful in all competitive examinations and as well as for the language test, international language test, if I talk about. Not only reading, but even writing, if we talk about writing. Now, writing also has got something very unique. Writing includes your precis writing, that is like 1/3 of what passage is already given to you. If we talk about essay writing, essay is the basic criteria of clearing any examination these days, because that enables or ensures that you have certain things inbuilt in you and you are just jotting down it through English as a component. Now, if we talk about writing skills or listening skills, once you're able to understand what the other person is trying to communicate to you, is when you can actually reply, which is the fourth major component, that is spoken English. Now, once we are talking about spoken English, there are certain English fundamentals. We started from the very basic, that is alphabets. We actually learn alphabets from the very childhood, that is A to Z. Wherein in American English, that is accepted in North America as well as in South America, they call it A to Z. There are some pronunciation rules differentiated between British English and American English. The mode of communication or writing, writing as the component, we accept as the Britain English. So the British English, when we talk about British English, we take it from A as in apple till Z as in zoo, zebra. Now, as far as American English is concerned, they take it from A, B, and the letter I. I is individually taken as the English alphabet, wherein you would have to pronounce I differently, wherein if we consider that into Britain English or British English, I is a different component, or I is a different alphabet altogether. So if I want to use anti-national these days, anti-national topic is opening out in the crowd, and people are trying to use this word anti-national in their paragraph or in their sentences. Now, once we talk about anti-national, the pronunciation in American English comes with anti-nationals. They pronounce that separately. The pronunciation of I is different from what actually we pronounce in British English. Now, there are some basic pronunciation rules in spoken English, wherein phonetics is what we apply. There is always a misconception about the word recognize. It's not recognize, it's recognize. It's not Wednesday, it's Wednesday. There are certain basic rules of pronunciation that we accept and give away in our day-to-day life. Now, there are certain different spelling rules, such as prefix rule and suffix rule. Now, once we talk about the prefix rule, there are certain words that are adjoined before the word and after the word. Prefix enables you to join that word before the word, and suffix enables you to join that alphabet or word just after your word completes. There are certain sort of prefix stuff that I'll help you out with. Prefix is something in Hindi we call it as ke pehle. For example, we use certain sort of titles like Mr., Miss, Mrs., or any sort of profession like doctor. And these days we are even adopting advocate as ADV. So all these prefixes are used these days and prefixed before their name actually arrives. Now, spoken English. Once we talk about spoken English, there are certain rules of spoken English where in case if you want to add any prefix, only in spoken English you use your last name. So if in case my last name is Pandey, I will be using this as Mr. Pandey. Or if I want to initiate a conversation with a prefix of Mr., I would always use a last name followed by Mr. Now, this was about the rules of prefix. Let us talk about certain sort of rules about prefix. Here in suffix we have certain different rules. The meaning and the word synonym totally changes. The synonym of word changes because there are two different suffix at the same point of time you use for a similar word. So if in case we are talking about care, if we try and use full suffix with care, if we add that full suffix with care, or if we add that less suffix with care, it becomes careful and careless. Here we have adjoined full and less. The meaning of care totally changes. Careful is something you fully care of, and careless is something you do not care of. So there is a differentiate of meaning in two different words. Now let's come back to the English basic fundamentals. There are some English fundamentals that we need to follow. The English fundamentals such as the reading of clock. Many a times what happens is, once we try and just read out the timings that are there in clock, if say the timings are 12:15 a.m., actually we would have to say it 12:15 because 15 indicates there are 4 time division or bifurcation that has been made in the clock, wherein you can see it's 12, 3, 6 and 9. 3 which indicates that it's quarter, so wherein we say 12:15. And if we are near to the round of clock that has yet to be happened, and if if in case we are talking about the stick that is there in 9, we would have to say that there is 15 minutes left out to be there in 12, so which in case we would have to say that it's 12:15. There are certain sort of preposition rules that are involved in this reading of clock timings. So if in case we are talking about 12:15 or 12:15, there is always a gap of 15 minutes. Now if we are trying to inculcate all these rules, spoken English rules in our sentences, is when we are able to speak and understand proper English. Now let's come out to the introduction. Our first topic should always be an introduction. Once we would want to come ahead and give our introduction to any of like formal or informal meetings. There are two sort of meetings that actually held in front of you. Is one of them is formal and informal. Basically we implement the introduction rules in formal. The introduction part should always consist like say 8 to 9 major components, starting with your name, your age, followed by your address, your father's name or your husband's name, and then you would have to give your education qualification, siblings, what siblings as in case of like your what does your brother do, and just you would have to complete that in a short line, and what does your sister does. Now once we are talking about the introduction, you would have to actually understand that your introduction should not exceed more than 5 minutes and not less than 3 minutes. You would have to complete your introduction from 3 and 5 minutes altogether. Now, what does formal introduction includes? Formal introduction would include your name, your age, your address, your father's name or your husband's name and their job or their profession, your siblings if you have any. Siblings would always include your blood relation, that is your blood brother or your blood sister. Now, once we talk about the education qualifications, we would only have to include the recent education qualifications or any post-graduation degree or diploma that we have. Now, once we are done with our education qualifications, we would even have to talk about our hobbies and our passion. That plays a very vital role in our introduction. Actually, the all together, if we talk about our introduction, your hobbies would actually tell about your favorite pastime. That would always include your favorite pastime. And once we talk about our passion, the passion would always include what we are delighted or what we have that hardcore inbuilt stuff that we actually wanted to do in our future, nearby future. Now, once we talk about the actual say if in case I wanted to become an IAS officer. So from the very beginning, like since we started from our school days, from the very beginning, that is from my school days, I'll opt my original subject, that is what I opt these days in my IAS career from the very beginning, that is from my school days. Say if in case my optional subject is geography these days, I'll be always opting my geography from the way back from like say from my school days. Now, from my school days till wherein I'm preparing for IAS, the time duration that I would have to accept geography as my subject would always be my passion, because this passion would actually tell me to to become a district magistrate in any area or or a collector. That is what is my passion all about, because I started my passion way back when I was in school. Now, this is how I would have to tell about my hobby and my passion. Once we are done with our hobby and passion, we'll end up with certain sort of greeting, and that's how we end the formal conversation or formal introduction with. Now, once we'll start our informal conversation or informal introduction, we would only have to end up the informal introduction in 4 or 5 lines altogether. No more than 5 lines. That would not take more than 1 or 1.5 minutes. Because what happens is, once we start greeting somebody, we always end up with certain indications that what we do, or we give formal introduction to the same schoolmates or same college mates when we try and meet them after some time, or after say in case after ages. Now what happens is this is very essential for spoken English. Why is it essential for spoken English? Irrespective of what we have already done in our school timings or school times, because here the informal introduction also gives 3 or 4 lines of what we are doing recently and comparing what we used to do and what we are doing. So this informal conversation should not take more than 2 minutes of your introduction portion, or not more than that of 3 minutes, because anyways we would have to end our formal conversation from 3 and 5 minutes. Now, this was the essential component which I told you about spoken English, the formal conversation or formal introduction and informal introduction. Now let us talk about the basic grammar that is required for English. Once we talk about basic grammar, now basic grammar would always include your parts of speech. The parts that are actually essential for a speech is known as parts of speech, where a subject and an object is always required to develop a speech. Now, what are the 8 parts of speech that are essential is starting from noun, the pronoun, third comes your verb, then comes your adverb that modifies the verb, and then comes adjective that qualifies noun or pronoun altogether. Then comes your preposition, which is very essential. We'll even talk about preposition laterly. Now, once we are done with preposition, we would even have to take conjunction, the contrary of preposition. And after conjunction, the last comes is interjection, where you get time to actually show your emotion, feelings, and the exclamation marks all together. Now, the basic parts of speech which is essential for even competitive exams or for basic grammar that you imply in spoken English, you would have to come with a basic step of, say, noun. Noun is the name of a person, place, animal or thing. We have always learned that there are 5 types of noun which are required for a basic communication or for any competitive exam. Those 5 types of nouns are we start noun with the proper noun, common noun, then comes your collective noun, then comes your abstract noun, and last is your material noun, that is your concrete noun. There is 6th most important essential in noun is compound noun, wherein you compound noun with certain other topics of parts of speech. Say if in case we would want to compound noun with adjective, we want to compound noun with adverbial adjective, or we would want to compound noun with a verb. Verb is always your activity or your occurrence or your state of being. Now, with this, we are done with noun. Now let's talk something about pronoun. Pronoun is like proactively you are including that noun instead of a noun. You use a substitute of a noun proactively. Say if in case we are talking about pronoun and we are talking about noun, you'll always frame a sentence if say Ram is a boy. So in pronoun you'll always say he is a boy, indicating Ram as a noun. So you are using the substitute of noun in a pronoun and using he instead of Ram. So pronoun is proactively using the substitution of noun. Now let us talk about verb. Verb is a major component for time and tenses because verb would always tell you about 5 major bifurcations of verb in 5 different forms. That is your base form, your first form of verb, your second form, that is your participle, the past participle. Your fourth form of verb is a plural form of verb. Say if in case you would want to add s, add es, or add ies to verb, and your fifth form would always be your. Okay, so with this we are done with the 5 major bifurcations of verb. Verb is always your activity, your physical activity or your mental activity. Say if in case we would even want to divide verb into 3 parts, that would not exceed verb with 3 basic divisions of an activity, which would always be your action verb, that would divide that into physical or mental activity that we are talking about. Second is always your occurrence. Occurrence would always tell you about the things that automatically happens. Say if in case we talk about tree grows, so that always grows automatically. There is no physical activity that you imply in a tree. The sun rises. The sun rises automatically. You do not have any activity or physical or mental activity that is involved in occurring of, or say if in case the rising of sun. So the occurrence is always an activity that happens automatically. Now, the third component that we are talking about is, or the third division of a verb is always state of being. I always keep telling my students about state of being is anything that is there, any auxiliary thing that is always there, hai. Say if in case a word of Hindi hai is similar to state of being of a verb. Now, there are 2 important topics which would always divert you in verb, and if you are trying to implement things in say if in case you are trying to use an auxiliary verb of like say to be form of verb, to do form of verb, or to have form of verb, you'll always be very confused of all these forms of verb using in a singular or in a plural sentences. So if in case we are talking about auxiliary verb or modal verb, auxiliary verb would always include 3 parts, that is your to be form of verb, that would include your is, am, are, was and were, because these are also helping verbs that are help joining you from a sentence, that is from subject till your main verb ends. So to be form of verb includes is, am, are, was and were. Now once we are talking about to do form of verb, it would include do, does, did. And if we talk about to have form of verb, that would always include have, has, had. So these are all forms of auxiliary verb wherein if you are trying to join a sentence from subject, like if we try to join a subject to a predicate, subject to an object, subject to a main verb, these auxiliary verb works as a helping verb altogether. Now let us talk about modal verbs. Modal verbs would include may, might, less probability and high probability of any statement, or giving a pressure or giving a low pressure to noun. Now, once you would want to prove your point, and if I am using a word, a modal verb, say if in case I talk about would not give that sort of pressure which will would give. So there is always a difference of may and might, there is always a difference of will and would, there is always a difference of can and could usage, there is always a difference of shall and should. Also we'll talk about out to, need. These are all active modal verbs that we are talking about. Active in terms of every sentence that we try to communicate with some other person, we would always use these modal verbs in our sentences to actually give a probability, to actually give a possibility of our sentences, the surety or less surety. So if in case I want to differentiate between may and might, I use them in a same sort of sentence, in a same sort of sentences. So how would we try and use may and might? Say if in case I give an example of I might go to London and I may go to London. So with a sentence of I might go to London has a less possibility of going London. So if in case we want to translate I might go to London in Hindi, I would say मैं लंदन जा सकता हूँ. And if in case I wanted to translate I may go to London, wherein we have a higher possibility of going to London, in Hindi we'll translate to मैं लंदन जाऊंगा. जाऊंगा और जा सकता हूँ has a difference. So right choice of word in a right choice of sentences, when you try and input that right choice of word in a sentences, you give a less possibility, higher probability. You give a short where in case you tell about your friends or your relatives, if you want to give certain sort of surety that yes they are coming or they aren't coming, you use these modal verbs to actually join main verb from subject or main verb to subject. Now once we are trying to use a verb in a sentences, there would always be two sort of verbs. One I have already told you is your auxiliary verb, and the other one is your main verb. So main verb is always your activity. Activity is your playing, jumping, running, sitting, standing, and so on. And your auxiliary verb is always am, are, is, was, were, may, might, can, could, and so on. There are certain rules for these modal verbs and these auxiliary verbs as well. Now, these the topics that I'm talking about or I'm discussing about right now are the basics of English grammar. These topics in English grammar plays a vital role in your communication. Even now when I'm trying to construct any sort of sentences, I would use any transformation or any words to adjoin my sentences. I'll always input my auxiliary verb and my main verb, because anyways I'm doing an activity which is my main verb, and when I am doing certain thing I would always join with am, and am proves out to be an auxiliary verb, a helping verb. So With this, we are even done with verb. There is a huge topic of verb which needs to get understood, and even after understanding this verb topic is when we could actually move to adverb. Now let's move on to adverb. Okay, here if you separate a word that is adverb into two parts, you'll always come with ad plus verb. Obviously, you're adding certain thing to verb which would modify verb altogether. Now, once we are talking about ad plus verb, your verb is an activity or any sort of mental activity, any occurrence that you're trying to input in a sentence. If you're trying to modify that verb by emphasizing certain sort of verb or certain sort of adverb, pressurizing verb would always be your adverb. No worries with that. I would even tell you or even give you more examples of adverb. So if in case we are talking about playing. So if you are playing hard, hard would always be your modifying of main verb. So a hard is your adverb. Adverbs normally ends with ly, tion, sion, where in case you add that with your main verb, not with your auxiliary verb. So anything that you add or modify to create a modification, to create an emphasis on verb is your adverb. Now let us talk about adverb in detail. Now if I'm trying to create a normal sentence which has an auxiliary verb and which has a main verb, that is I am running. So this is a present continuous tense that I'm talking about because this is in ing form. So running is your main verb and am is your auxiliary verb that we have already done this example. Now trying to input adverb would be here or would be here, followed by or prefixed by your main verb. So now when we are talking about main verb, adverb should always be before or should always be after your main verb, which can actually qualify or modify your main verb. So let us put it this way, that your main verb is followed or prefixed by your adverb to actually modify the sentence. So this simple sentence, if I would use I'm briskly running, so which is I'm quickly running. So briskly is your adverb, which is modifying your main verb. So with this, the adverb topic is also done. Okay, so we were done with the example I am running. That was a portion of verb. Now when we are trying to modify this I am running in an adverbial sentence, how would we do that? I would always say that I am running and modification of adverb, any word that would modify the verb would be briskly. So if in case I'm putting a verb or inserting a verb briskly in this sentence, I would say that I am running briskly. So your main verb is running and briskly is running quickly, or as if in case briskly is a word that is actually used for cat, that cat runs briskly. So in this case, if I'm running briskly, I would always use adverb of ly or adverb of tion, adverb of sion, adverb, a simple adverb form to actually qualify the main verb. So this is the actual role and responsibility of adverb, to modify the verb. Now, let us move to a new topic. The new topic would be the next part of speech, that is adjective. Adjective is also a component which qualifies a noun or a pronoun or phrases. Now, once we are talking about adjective, adjective is really important because adjective is that sort of qualification of noun wherein you emphasize, you pressurize the entire sentence altogether. Now, adjective is also uh, a main part of speech wherein you try to qualify noun through using suffixes like ly, tion, sion, less, because these are all suffixes which are adjoined in a word and prefixed before noun or after noun. Now, when we talk about adjective, adjective has a different bifurcations altogether. Like adjective of number, a number is placed before a noun. Say if in case we are talking about two boys, so here we are giving a visheshta, an adjective, a qualification of noun, that we are sure that there are two boys. So two boys, the two word here is a number of adjective. Now if we are talking about quantity, so quantity is also a part in adjective. So if in case we are talking about half a liter, half a dozen, we are talking about a quarter a glass. So these are all a quantity that we are trying to show. This quantity add an added advantage to your noun. You are actually cleared out, or you are actually, so if in case we are talking about, if we have a vague idea, if we have unclear idea about a noun, that how much a quantity we are talking about. So we'll always say that, say if in case we are talking about half a quantity, half a liter, half a dozen, full dozen. So if in case quarter a dozen, say if in case we are talking about quarter a glass, so we are sure that there is a quarter of glass filled with water or filled with any other liquid, and the remaining 3/4 of water is left out. So here ultimately we are qualifying the noun, pronoun or phrases. So this is what we are talking about adjective. There is one more bifurcation of adjective, that is bifurcated into color. So if in case we are talking about a t-shirt, a shirt, or a normal thing we are talking about, we see a color in that. And if we wanted to end that sentence into a simple sentence and putting that with a verb or a noun, and if in case in a second sentence we wanted to pressurize, we want to emphasize that simple noun with an adjective, is when we are actually giving certain sort of indication, certain sort of pressure to that basic noun. Now, put them in an example. I have a t-shirt. So I have a t-shirt would always say that the noun t-shirt is a common noun, where in case I'm just trying to put that t-shirt in a simple noun form. We do not have any idea that what color t-shirt I'm talking about, what size of t-shirt I'm talking about, the number which I had already told you about. Now if in case I wanted to write an example of I have a green t-shirt, so this green is a color where in case you're qualifying a noun. So this adjective of color proves that you are emphasizing a noun altogether. So adjective, if I would want to define an adjective in a simple sentence, I would always say that an adjective is a word that is prefixed or suffixed before or after a noun, pronoun or a phrases to qualify that particular word. Now, let's move on to a new topic, that is the sixth part of speech, that is preposition. Now, why is preposition so essential in part of speech? Because anyways, if you would want to join two words, or if you would want to link a noun to a pronoun, if you would wanted to link a pronoun to a noun, or vice versa, even with prepositional phrases, The preposition plays a vital role to join that, to link that. Now, the words like to, for, from, after, before, these are all prepositions that are actually used to link two nouns, pronouns, or prepositional phrases in a single sentence. And if we want to join or conjoin the two sentences into one sentence, you actually convert all these prepositions into conjunction. Now that is a different topic, conjunction. Now we are talking about linking of two words in a single sentence. Now when we try to link, preposition is always a link between noun, pronoun and prepositional phrases. However, conjunction is conjoining verb adverb of two sentences or words in a single sentence. That is the main difference of preposition and conjunction. Now, if in case I wanted to use a simple example and where actually the students commit mistakes is, if I'm saying that I wanted to talk to you, and students or any other candidates who's actually applying for competitive examinations, they try to misuse that verb to with. So it's not I wanted to talk with you, it's always I wanted to talk to you. Second sentence is if I wanted to talk someone over call, and it's incorrect if I use the sentence I wanted to talk on call. So on call is something different, over call is different. So there are certain rules of each and every word used in a single sentence, trying to link two nouns or pronouns in a single sentence. Now, if we even talk about the seventh parts of speech, the conjunction plays a vital role. Why does it play a vital role? Because conjunction enables you to join, coordinate, correlate, subrelate the two sentences into one sentences by putting and, by putting but, by inserting with, and so on. Because these sentences, once conjoins together in a single sentences, can only be possible through a conjunction. So there is always a difference of preposition and of conjunction. Is preposition tries to link two words in a single sentences, that those two words should either be noun or be a pronoun. And whereas if I talk about conjunction would try to conjoin two sentences into a single sentences by inserting a conjunction word. Now, those two words joining together, or those two sentences joined together, joins together, would either be verb or an adverb, which would always show your physical activity or mental activity joining in a single sentence. Joining in a single sentence altogether. Now, there is always, as I explained to you, the differences between preposition and conjunction. Preposition is linking of two words, say noun or pronoun, and conjunction is conjoining of two words or two sentences in a single sentence. Those two sentences or word would either be verb or an adverb. So with this, we are done with the seventh part of speech. Now let's move to the eighth part of speech. The last part of speech, that is showing all your expressions, showing all your feelings, showing all your sentiments, comes with a new topic, interjection. Interjection is exclamatory mark. Once you try and put any exclamatory mark in a sentence, you will always show your expression, or you would always show your feelings, you would always show your sentiments, you would always show your inner quality, or you wanted to show any sort of expression that is different from a single or a normal sentence. So if in case I'm talking about a normal sentence and I try to put that interrogative sentence, a question mark sentence. So if in case that sentence is, what are you doing? So it's a simple sentence. I'm not trying to inculcate or input any expression in this sentence. And if I'm shocked with anyone else's behavior, or if in case anyone is unwell, or if anyone has died, I would put an exclamatory mark that would be what. So I would always start that sentence what, because I am unaware of that particular happening. So I'd say what, she died, or what, she is unwell, and so on. Because you're trying to put a sort of exclamatory mark in a sentence where you're trying to show a feeling of hatred, a feeling of caring, a feeling of success, a feeling of order, a feeling of advice, a feeling of notion, a feeling of quality that is there, appreciating that quality, and so on. So interjection is always your emotions, just flow out your emotions, and you try to use this interjection sentences in terms of exclamatory mark put at the end or in the midst of a sentence, wherever applicable. So these were the 8 parts of speech we were talking about, essential for a speech to actually get completed. Now, we started with noun, pronoun, and then verb, adverb, adjective, preposition, conjunction, and last was interjection. So these are 8 parts of speech which are so essential for a speech to actually get constructed, and you try to implement all these 8 parts of speech in a single sentence or in a speech, where in case you try to inculcate these individually or together, not all together, because you cannot put any 8 parts of speech in a single sentence, or that would be a speech. So which is why it's called 8 parts of speech for a sentence. Now, many times we have a misconception that articles is also a part of speech, or we are trying to input that articles in parts of speech, wherein articles, the role of articles is just a prefix role, wherein case, let's talk about articles now. So let me clarify that article is not a part of speech, because articles is just a prefix or suffix, almost a prefix in terms, because you either would wanted to tell that this is the only thing by inputting the as a prefix, or if you're talking about quantity of A or N, a kg, say if in case we are talking about a dozen, so you would always indicate the number or the specific thing or specific idea we are talking about. You will try to input the as your prefix. So articles can never be your parts of speech, because articles is always necessary as a prefix and less as a part of speech. Now, there are 3 rules of articles. The rule number 1 says, always go with pronunciation. The pronunciation of a word. First, we'll try to input the A or N in a sentences by looking at a word wherever required article, and we'll try to look at a word if the pronunciation is different from the actual pronunciation. Now, there are rules of silent alphabets in a word, where if in case we are talking about honest, the H is silent. If we're talking about hour, the H is silent. If you're talking about MLA, so M is always AMM. So where in case it's required A and N as a prefix, if you're talking about a single MLA, so that would always be NMLA, NMP. And if you nowadays even we talk about FIR, so it's not a FIR, it's always an FIR, because F is always AFF. In Hindi also we type it as A and F. So it's F So in that case, you always prefix that with a and n. So which in case this is not a part of speech and it's a part of a word because you're using that as a prefix. So rule number 1 goes with the pronunciation. Rule number two goes with applying the at the beginning. See, we will try to use the before a or n because the is a specific thing or a specific idea that you try to prefix before a word. Now, once we are talking about the would always be something that is just one in the entire universe we are talking about. If in case we are talking about sun, so it will always be the sun. If we are talking about moon, so it would always be the moon or the uh, earth. Now, if you're talking about planets, so there is not just a single planet in the entire universe, there are few other planets or many other planets in the entire universe. So we cannot prefix planets with the because maybe we are talking about Mars, or even we are talking about Earth, or let's say if we are talking about Venus, Mercury. So it's not sure, we are not sure that what planet we are talking about. And if we are talking simply about Earth, which would always be prefixed as the. Now, rule number 3 and the last rule is your implying of a or n. Now, once we talk about the, a or n, the rule says that the would always be your specific thing or your specific idea. Your a would show a quantity of 1. Or the consonants B to Z applies here. A N would always show your vowels, that is A, E, I, O, U. Any word that begins with A, E, I, O, U or the pronunciation rules apply, you would always use N as a prefix with these vowels that are mentioned here. Now, if we are talking about quantity, a single quantity of A or N, we'll look at the pronunciation rule. What does the pronunciation says? If you're talking about a single FIR, the FIR has to be prefixed with N. Now, if you're talking about dozen of apples, so it would always cost, say if we are talking about N apples a dozen, so dozen is a singular word where in case you're applying a quantity of 1 and pronunciation rule number 1 which says pronunciation N. So prefix with pronunciation and we are talking about now. Now let's move to a new topic which says the usages of a and the in an example. So if in case we are talking about a degree of MBA, that can be a specific degree that we are talking about in a sentence, particularly focusing on MBA, the would imply. Now, if we are talking about a single degree, that is MBA, a post-graduation degree, which would be prefixed with A and N. And say if in case we are talking about any other word except the prime word as AMM or AFF, if say if in case we are talking about FBI, which is also an N, SDM, that is a position, which is also A and N. Now, if we are talking about BDO, here B is a block development officer. So BDO, B has no vowel sound. B has a consonant sound wherein we'll try to input a BDO. If that has got to be a specific thing, it would always be a specific position for anybody there in the development officer's jurisdiction, that would be the. And if in case there is no other specific thing required in a sentence in terms of BDO, we will always try and put a as a prefix. With this, we are even done with the topic articles. Now let's move ahead with the advanced grammar. Now,